This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way. When I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands. When I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl. Today, I am joined by Derek Clifford, CEO and founder of Elevate Equity. Derek, welcome to the show today.
John, pleasure to be here. Also an honor. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Yeah, so Derek and I met through a mastermind. We've met up at a couple events and we just kind of became friends. Turns out I work at the same company he used to work for. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And Derek, without further ado, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now and how you got there?
Yeah. Thanks, man. So currently we are multifamily investors. We run a portfolio of about, depending on how you count it, about anywhere between 300 and 500 units. I say that because some of the stuff is really kind of hands off for me as an owner, as a co-owner. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. We do multifamily right now, but it didn't always used to be that way, John. Before, we started up just like every other person did in the single family space. And when we did single families, it was really kind of this one-to-one thing while I was working a full-time job. And it took me about, 5 to 7 years for me to build up a portfolio to a point where it just didn't make sense to scale anymore on the single family side. So, then we jumped over into the multifamily and started learning all about these crazy things you can do to scale up very quickly and also find your niche too in this very diverse and very interesting and very fun environment, I would say, in this field. So, but, just real quick, I guess how I got started, if you want me to answer that, John, is I'm a chemical engineer by training. So I have an engineering background and went to business school while I was working a full-time job. And then, I started investing in real estate because I had a few experiences where I got disillusioned with the company I was working with. I felt like I was adding so much value to the company, right? Like going on site to these like facilities and being a member of the client team when I was a consultant back in the consultancy days. And I was adding so much value by basically running projects. Like I was looking at how much my time was worth and how much profit the company was making from that, both the people that I was serving and also my own consultancy company. And I just got sick, right, when I did the numbers. And so, obviously, when I brought that issue up to the leadership staff, they're not used to people talking to them like that. So the conversation didn't go well. And I vowed from there forward that I needed to find a way to create some income outside of my W-2, started reading books, right, getting educated. And then we found really real estate investing on accident. My wife, she had bought a condo back in 2008. A couple of months before the crash, the giant mortgage meltdown. And she purchased the thing. And I think she paid 250 grand or something for it in Washington State, just right across from her university. And as the years roll by, obviously 2 months after that, her value had evaporated from 250,000 to like 90. So she's really underwater on this property. And I wasn't around then at that point. But by the time I came around and she had graduated from grad school, she got a residency in Northern California. So she had to leave the place, even though she had been in it for 4 years. And this is like 2012, 2013. And she couldn't let it go. I was working with her at the time. And it's like, there's no way this, because the property was still underwater. It had only been, it had recovered a little bit. It had gotten to like 180,000, but still wasn't worth the loan that was behind it. And what we decided to do is we decided, well, there's no other thing. We can't sell it. We don't really know what to do here. Let's just put a renter in and just wait. And hopefully it appreciates more. And we put a renter in and we started driving down to California. And as we were driving to California, I remember seeing an email notification from our bank saying that our check's been deposited. And that was the first real taste of some mailbox money. And, I turned to my wife and I was like, if we did this on accident, what would happen if we leaned into this and did it on purpose? And the answer to that question, John, was many years of hard work, obviously. But eventually, it led me to be able to retire from my full-time job, run a side hustle, start a single family portfolio, buying properties in the Midwest from California, and doing it with a lot of intention, and buying in the path of progress, studying up, spending 2 years on bigger pockets. That's my engineering brain that kind of comes back into this whole thing. But basically, we leaned into it like we said we were going to do, and we found that holy grail. We found that investment vehicle that really was going to be able to helpfully, reliably replace our income from our full-time job, so we didn't have to rely on W-2s to carry us through to retirement.
Oh, it's great. A lot of great stuff there. So regarding the W-2, you said something that I can relate with, and I know a lot of people out there can relate with. You are working hard, you're providing value, you don't feel like you're being compensated according to the value you're providing, which real estate can do that for you. So I want to get a little bit deeper into the tipping point where you're still working and you're investing, and if you can go into a little more detail about some of the steps that were taken and the decisions that were made along the way when you did actually take it full time and some of the things you went through.
Yeah, some practical advice that I have. So I always encourage people to do the 4 C's. The 4 C's are kind of the things that they helped me become a real estate investor and help me stick with it over time. The 4 C's, I'll just go through them real quick and then I'll explain each what they are. The first is consistency. Being consistent in what it is that you're going to be doing up front, right? Like just knowing that you got to commit to something each day. That's consistency. Clarity, understanding what it is that your goal is by doing this, because you got to have a vision that's going to kind of pull you through the lows and help keep you grounded during the highs, right? You got to stay focused, make sure that with all those profits that you make from your investments, that you reinvest them and not harvest them and eat them, right? Number 3 is coaching. If you have a coach, they can help shortcut a lot of the things that you would have made mistakes on, right? So there's no reason for you to reinvent the wheel and make the same mistakes that other investors have done. And then the 4th C is connections. And I think having a peer group and people that to tap into, that's real power in real estate investing, because it's a people-based business, John, right? Like you're renting out your units to people. You have property managers that are your team, they're people, right? You have investors, you have family members, stakeholders, everyone is people. And we're all trying to do, the best thing for everyone. And it's an art, right? It's an art form, this whole business. So again, it's consistency, clarity, coaching, and community or connections. Those 4 things are things that you need to establish. And upfront, John, like not everyone is strong on all 4 of those C's. That's okay, right? You got to pick one of those things and really double down on it. And for me, my brain worked a lot around consistency. If I spent 1 hour every morning coming into the office before traffic built up in the Bay Area, right? Before traffic built up, before everyone else got in there, so I could spend my time early in the morning when it was mid-morning in the Midwest, right? I could do all the things I need to do with the other 3 C's in that consistency piece. Vice versa, if you have connections, right? Or if you have a network, then they can help point you in the direction so that you can use that to leverage your other 3 C's. But all 4 of those C's are going to be needed in everything you do. Just pick one, the one that resonates with you the most, and jump full into it, and you'll get where you need to go. That's my advice to full-time workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to that, the consistency piece, because it's hard when your brain desires to be working on this real estate. You're building your dream with the real estate, and then you have to go switch gears into your W-2 job and completely kind of disregard what you've been working on. And a couple things that you mentioned was 5 to 7 years, right? Is that the time frame when you started investing to when you took the leap full time? And you also mentioned that you were doing this about an hour a day. Maybe that's all you could dedicate to it. And what I'm going through right now is, you want to dedicate more, but you just have to fulfill these other obligations. So that consistency thing really strikes a chord with me. So 100% on that. Now, Derek, 3 degrees of freedom. Let's talk about that. So I know you're big on the 3 degrees of freedom. Can you dive into those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of people, when they think full financial freedom, wow, that's 3 F's right there. Full financial freedom. I didn't realize that. But anyway, when people realize or think about full financial freedom, they think about it as like this all or nothing type of concept, right? And I would encourage people to not think about it that way, just because it's daunting, right? And if something is too daunting when you're first starting out, like the vision just seems really blurry. It's hard to get there. Obviously, you can boost your mindset to get to your point where that vision then does become a little bit clear. But what I would encourage folks to do is look at it in 3 degrees. The first degree of freedom is location freedom. If you have the ability to work something out with your current employer or your current work situation where you can work remotely, right? I'm not saying that everyone can do that, but the sooner that you can get yourself into something like that is going to work out for you. Trust me. It just does. Even if you have to take a little bit of a pay cut, and I'm not saying take a big one, being able to be locationally independent means that you have control over your expenses more, right? You can move to a cheaper part of the country and still make your same amount of work. And then you have a little bit more freedom to enjoy what's around you because you have full choice, right? You just have more choices. So that's location freedom. The second layer or second degree of freedom is called time freedom. And with time freedom, that's where you have gotten to a point where maybe you're at a level with your employer where as long as you get results done, they don't care how many hours you work. They're not tracking you all the time. And so you just got to get your results done from week to week, right? That's time freedom. If you are at a place, and a lot of this is mindset too, John, right? Like I know that some people will spend a lot of time doing things in their full-time job that doesn't yield any results. So having that location piece and the time piece, even within a full-time setting, is going to help you live a much more fulfilled life, even if you're not there yet, right? If you're not there with investing or anything, you can achieve those 2 layers by just working something out with your full-time employer or with a different employer, finding a different job, right? Being intentional about it and seeking that out. And then, of course, the third layer, the third degree of freedom is financial. Eventually, when you have your assets or your cash or, your investments making enough money to help sustain the lifestyle that you want to live, wherever you want to live and with the time that you want to invest in things, then you achieved the full 3 degrees of freedom. And I like to think about it that way. It's because, in engineering, we have degrees of freedom, right? Like, you have an XY axis, you only have 1 degree freedom, which is how long the line is, right? And with 2 degrees of freedom, you have like a shape, you have a square, right? That can be infinitely big or infinitely small. And then the 3rd degree is obviously coming in the 3D and having the ability to do anything you want. So I like to think of it as each time you add an extra layer, it's exponential levels of freedom. And so I'd encourage you to start where you are right now, not think about the whole enchilada all at once, and just figure out how can you get to the next level, because that's going to be so helpful for you and your fulfillment. And then, of course, when you're fulfilled, you're going to do better work and you're going to get to where you want to go faster. That's just my advice.
Yep, that's great stuff. So you mentioned mindset. A lot of people feel a lot of fear. Maybe they are making some passive income from some investments, whatever they may be, but the thought of taking it full time and just relying on yourself, having that self-confidence to get the job done instead of just relying on somebody else paying you a consistent, steady paycheck. What about that?
Yeah. So, if I understand you correctly, you're talking about the people that aren't making because that they're not in a full-time job. They're trying to pull things together like from a 1099 income standpoint.
Sorry. Let me rephrase. So somebody who works a full-time W-2 job and is investing on the side, they're thinking about pulling the trigger to go full-time. But that W-2 income is real comfy, but they're not totally satisfied. The mindset shift that takes place from going to working for somebody else, versus going out and doing it all on your own?
Yeah, got it. Okay. I sorry I misunderstood your question there. Yeah. So I think that this is really just a matter of mindset and what it is that you want. It comes back to those 4 C's, right? Like if you're really clear on what you want from life, then all of a sudden, like all these things, all these answers start becoming clear. Like if that why gets big enough, then the how just starts getting legs, right? I think I picked that up from Jim Rohn or something. It's in a phrase that I'll never forget. And so if you have a big enough clarity, or you're big on clarity, you understand what it is that you're trying to get to, then I think you'll find a way to get there. I think some things that maybe hold people back, if maybe they're thinking about doing it, is like imagine if you were doing what you're doing on your side hustle as your full-time gig. Imagine that that was what you did all day every day. Could you do that? Is that something that like gives you energy? My thought is that most people should say yes, because it's a hard business, right? Like it takes time to do this. And so if you have the mentality to stick with a side hustle like this, and you're building up passive income on the side, and you want to do more of that because you enjoy what you're doing, then maybe that makes sense. But sometimes, John, like people stay in a W-2 because they don't know what they're going to do with their lives, right? So there's a mindset shift. It's like, if I leave, what happens to my identity? And so once you have the financial piece all settled out, you have like 2 or 3 years worth of runway, either in cash, or you've got investments that are matching your full-time income, and they're coming in and paying for all your expenses. Now it's a matter of identity. It's not a matter of finances. And that's when you need to start talking with people like John, right? Start to upgrade your network and figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, right? Like, what do you want to do with your time? That's really the biggest thing for me, is the clarity in that question.
Got it. So earlier you mentioned, picking a piece of this puzzle and, that you may be good at or better at, and going all in on it. Now, I know you work closely with your spouse. How are you able to leverage your spouse, and what do you recommend for others to do the same?
Man, great question. Really good question. So my spouse, my wife, Sophie, she is the reason why I'm doing this, for a lot of different reasons, right? But the main reason, I mean, when we got first started early on, she was the one that had that condo. I had no idea of even renting or owning rental property. Like that didn't even cross my mind. I was just planning on buying a house, living there, working a W-2, and just retiring, right? Just like they tell you to do in school, and like my mom and dad and our families basically expect from us. I think that but I'm sorry, what was the question? One more time. I'm sorry. Hopefully we can edit this.
Of course. No, just so talk about working with your spouse, and how you're able to leverage her skill set versus your own skill set. You work on the things that you're good at. She works on the things that she's good at. I know for me, working with my spouse, it can be a bit challenging at times. So what's your strategy for working with the wife?
Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm gonna back up there and just say that, yeah, when you work with your spouse, like again, my spouse is the reason why I'm doing this business. She bought the properties in the first place. Without her, there wouldn't be any type of growth there in that department, because it never even crossed my mind to own rental property. So let me just get that clear up front. But the other thing is that my spouse, even my wife, even though she is not involved in the day-to-day, she is more of like an advisor. She's like the visionary in our relationship. I'm more of an integrator. That's just the way that I like to think and like to work. And she helps me out by clearing roadblocks and getting me to think about the big picture. So again, it kind of comes back down to a shared vision. We've had, on our podcast, John, we talk with tons and tons of couples who have the same question. And we bring on these power couples to talk about why and how they're able to work together. And the main thing is vision. Understanding that working with your spouse can be a huge blessing, and that even if a spouse is not actively involved, they may be passively involved by giving you a time, space, and energy to be able to do your business, by taking care of the kids or going to get food and, just taking care of all of that. Like that's a true partnership, right? And they're just as in it as you are, because they're allowing you the space to do that. Some things that I would recommend for people who are looking to get more on the same page with your spouse is understand that they don't have to be active in the business. They can help you in that way, right? They can be supportive and understand what you're doing. I would say that having conversations about vision is really important. Understanding where you want to go in the next 3 to 5 years, like doing that out of intention and not just drifting around. One. Number two is when you have that conversation, for every I, there should be 99 we's. So don't be talking about individual stuff on this. Like make sure that you're using the word we instead of I. Don't use yours and mine, use ours. Like use those pronouns, right? Catch yourself from saying those things. It'll force you to think about like what you're doing together as a couple. The third thing is for that conversation, it has to be the right time, right? If you have kids screaming in the background, it's probably not going to be a productive conversation. Or if you guys just got over a spat about something, again, probably not going to be very helpful. And then the fourth thing is set ground rules so that there's no negativity allowed. Like it's just a safe space where you can openly talk about possibilities and things to happen. And that will help get your vision and kind of like the high level connection about where you want to go up and running. And it may take many conversations, but that is kind of like the leading indicator to get this going. Then it's all about like finding out who's good at what and who wants to do what. And there's always clues and indication into that. Like you should know your spouse well and leverage your spouse. Ask your spouse questions. Start bringing them into these conversations. Bring them into networking events and bring them to actual events if they want to go. Bring them with you. And get them to talk with other people that are just like them, because the real estate industry is so broad, right? And there's some people that are doing some things that may seem like it's not directly related to what you do, but it is, because it's just, there's a lot, trust me. And so I would just say that like leaning into it and really being a leader and saying that there's something that we can do together, whether it's, actively in the business or outside passively supporting each other, looping them into conversations, discussions, talking about risk, figuring out whether or not a person is trustworthy, all these things that I've leveraged my spouse for, right? That isn't directly related to the business, but she helps me an awful lot in clearing roadblocks, thinking about vision, hiring people, systems, why things aren't working. And then just being a shoulder to cry on too, sometimes when things happen, or since she's a doctor, she'll patch me up with the stitches if I start bleeding as well. So.
A lot of good things there, especially big theme is communication. Communication's always key. Timing of that communication. It's funny you mentioned that. We just had this realization that the timing of the communication is so important. Like you said, the kids screaming is not the time. When the kid's screaming is not the time to be bringing up these big ticket items. So great stuff there. So let's talk about travel a little bit. So you, especially now, you're all over the place, all over the world. Island hopping in Greece. Now you're in Ireland, if I recall correctly. And Airbnb nomadship is a term I've heard you use. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So back in May last year, we were still in the middle of COVID. We had sold our house because we decided that, after doing some math and everything, that we would be able to live cheaper than we were in the Bay Area at the time by just traveling around the country and world, right? So we kind of put that plan into motion, and right now we're on our 34th or 35th Airbnb in the last over a year or so. And it's been absolutely incredible. We've just been really enjoying life by hopping from one place to the other and living this life of location freedom. So pretty excited about how that has worked out for us. And, it's funny, like we're achieving financial independence because we're traveling, because it's cheaper to live in other parts of the world than it is in the California Bay Area. It's just funny how that worked out. Like, and this was another reason why my wife is so important, because she asked that question that led us to go down this path, right? Of becoming a fully digital Airbnb nomad. And so we're having a blast. Like we've been to Portugal, we've been in Greece, like a bunch of different islands. And right now we're in Ireland and looking to head to England and then do a cruise out into Norway and then Iceland after that. So we have a whole bunch of plans and places we've never been before. So we're super pumped for all that. And this is all part of like what real estate investing can enable for you when you have great boots on the ground partners and you can do your job online. So
that's so cool. And I would imagine, throughout this process of getting your life to a point where you can be a digital nomad. You have to simplify everything about your life extremely.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're not taking 12 suitcases a piece on these trips with you. So just the process of going through that, I'd imagine, has made your life a lot more simple as well.
Can I add just one thing there, John? Because we have 6 pieces of luggage and a car. That's all we own right now. And so, for you in the audience, I'd like for you guys to let that sink in, right? Like we don't have a house, we don't have furniture, we don't like that all, we sold all of that, right? And literally all we have now is a car and 6 pieces of luggage with our clothes, toiletries, computer equipment, and basically the things that we need to run a business. And we have been having a blast because, you know, I've been finding out that the more stuff you own, it starts to own you. And so you'd be surprised how incredible it is to not have all that stuff kind of controlling you from a distance, right? You'll be able to go anywhere. You don't have to pay a mortgage while you're paying for an Airbnb when you're abroad, right? Like it's just, it's incredible. It's a really great lifestyle that we've built.
Oh, it's so cool, man. I want to talk about, so you scaled up your portfolio pretty quickly. So how were you able to fund these deals? Did you do it with your own money? Did you bring other people's money, raise capital for these deals? How did that work out?
Yeah, John, it's actually been a mix of a lot of them. And it's just kind of like this patchwork of, what mentors tell me, where I am in my career, and also where my investors or my friends are, right? When we first started out, it was all single family homes, and that was all me, right? That's the natural path that most investors take. And so what ended up happening, John, was actually a lot of the beginning of the portfolio back in 2020 was my own my own rentals. I basically did a 1031 exchange, sold the entire portfolio to an investor that I knew in Indy for a really nice profit, and turned that into an apartment building and the start of another apartment building as well. It was a joint venture basis for another. Then when we sold our house in the Bay Area, we had some extra cash. So we used that also to joint venture up with some individuals. And, once you start getting closings done with a few brokers who've worked with you before, then they start giving you more deals to look at. And then as soon as that happens, you start telling your story. Some of your friends and your network starts asking you, what are you doing? Like, how is this all happening? And these questions led for them to be our first investors. So it's kind of like this whole, escape from W-2. Like it just allowed this whole thing to just happen. It was just this blossoming of, potentiality, because when one door closes, another one opens. And people saw how happy we were and how aligned we are. And as soon as we left our full-time job, that was when it was like game on, right? Like we had more time to start analyzing deals with the brokers that we had done business with my own private money, with my own money from those single family rentals. And the snowball just kind of picks up from there. And after after you've been doing this for a while and you get networked and plugged into the right groups, it just kind of takes off at that point. So that's kind of how it all snowballed to 500. And we're looking to add another 65 here. We're about to get in a contract on something else that we're doing as ourselves, basically as the lead in Louisville. But then we'll probably slow down and work on asset management, make sure that NOI is absolutely optimized for any type of, financing risk or whatever's coming in the economy. We think there's something's going to happen soon. So
excellent. So Derek, I know you're an extremely humble guy, but I want to hear what your secret sauce is. What have you done differently than other folks to get to your level of success that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, it comes down to those 4 C's. I think getting really clear on juggling all of those is important. But for me, the consistency piece is just, it's like almost a religious consistency. Morning routines are huge. I know, John, that you have yours and you wake up very, very early. But I think habit stacking, like using the book Atomic Habits to like build, a bunch of habits that kind of help start your day off before you even start your day with your W-2. Help start your day off really strong means that you've already got the W in the books before the day even starts, right? So I think that is just how my brain works. So bottom line, morning routines. So Miracle Morning, Atomic Habits. That's another book that's a must read. And then blocking out 30 minutes to an hour right after your routines when you're feeling good and sharp. This is all from the book, The One Thing, too. So that's another great book as well. So just having that morning routine and that block every single day when you're going to the office or when you're about to head into your work, just building that as part of your day. And that's just what you do. Leveraging that, like actually blocking your calendar out, making sure that you're there. There's a location, a time, a dedicated space for it. That's the secret sauce. That's just how my brain worked. Like it worked for me. And so I can outwork anyone out there. And that's how I was able to leverage that to get to where I am.
No, that's so great. And, I can attest to that. I have a similar routine that I do each morning. And, I'm not perfect. There are days that it doesn't happen, stuff happens. And I can tell you that my day is significantly less productive on those days that I don't run through that full routine and do everything. It's interesting how that works. I don't know if you've experienced that, but
I have, John, like I think I've been able to identify what it is. I think that there's a mental thing. At least for me, it comes up in an unhealthy way, which is guilt. If you don't make progress towards your long-term goals, it feels like you're slipping behind. At least that's how my brain interprets it. And so if you don't make progress on your goals in the beginning of the day, my mind is always directed towards what I could be doing for my business, even though I still have work to do. And, back in my W-2 days, I still had work to do in W-2. And so I never really had it like together. And same thing with meditation as part of the routine, right? Never really had it together throughout the day. And the day just didn't seem to click well. And just the mood wasn't there. And so I think it's just a part of like being integrated in a routine if you're a routine kind of person. That's what I've found for me, is that guilt shows up in a lot of different ways. And it just, for me, that's what I realized about myself. And once again, that realization came from my wife. Right. And so once you understand those things from people that can see your blind spots, then you can address those and work accordingly.
So true. So I want to circle back. You mentioned you had a deal coming up. A lot of stuff happening out there in the current macro space. What are some things that you're doing when you're looking at deals, some things you're looking out for, ways to mitigate risk when you're underwriting?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. I don't want to mention too much about this deal because it is 506B. So I think, I don't know when this is going to come out, but hopefully by then the offering will be
just
completed.
keep it general.
Yeah. So, what we've been doing with deals basically across the board right now is obviously not underwriting any cap compression at all. That's been a normal practice for us from the beginning. We always expand our cap rates by, I think it's 10 basis points for every year that's held. That's just kind of like a standard practice. And that's obviously there's more to it than that. We also are keeping our rent projections basically flat. So we're just doing like 2% rent increases along with 2% expense increases. I know that's not going to be the case because inflation is already raging, but we do that just to hedge risk, right? In what type of returns we're telling our investors. We're always doing 55 to 60% expense ratios on assumptions. At least that's what we think. Even if we can get lower than that, that's great. And we're also looking at some creative ways to structure PSAs or purchase agreements. Like for instance, right now, John, we on all of our deals, we're adding a pricing risk adjustment in our PSAs. So for instance, if let's say that the going rate right now is 5% for most bridge loans, then we'll say, okay, guys, look, we know that there's going to be some upward adjustment in risk. So we're going to underwrite to 5.5 on the PSA. And what I want to do is I want to share this risk with you. So for every 10 basis points for this loan product that we're planning on getting, because it's not going to change, this is what it is from the beginning, right? For every 10 basis points that it goes up, we want $1,000 per door price reduction as a seller credit at the end. It's a little way to kind of like help shave off some of the risks so that both the seller and the buyer can continue to transact. It's just a pre-negotiated retrade. I don't want to say it's a retrade, but it's like a risk share because you're building it right into the LOI, right into the PSA. And so we're doing that right now with our deals. And, it's a lot of people are questioning it, but we're seeing, like, for instance, this one that we're going into right now does have that in there. And then the other thing that we're looking at too, John, is more for workforce housing, more rent assistance programs, or at least properties that have like a mix of that, where there's market rents in there and then also rent assistance, because the rent assistance is obviously going to be paid for. There could be an issue where, obviously you're not attracting the best type of tenants, but with the right management and the right screening, you should still be able to get what you want from those types of programs. And just having a really lean operations and property managers that are familiar with that type of tenant base is going to be a really good thing. And so, all these things together help us feel really good about properties that we're buying. So yeah, that's kind of some strategies there. Hopefully that helps a little.
Excellent. So Derek, we got time for one more question. It's the question
All right.
I ask all of my guests. So a little bit of background. I work at Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. We're shutting down here in a couple years. And my goal is to replace my W-2 income with passive income. Up your advice to someone in my boat into one sentence, what would you tell us?
Man, I think that, you've already got a lot of this down. And so if I'm talking to you, it'd be different than what I would say to most people out there, because, I know you in the network space and everything, but I really believe that, wherever your internal world is at, your external world will follow. So it's never a bad time to work on your mindset, because your mindset's going to be the underpinning of all four of those C's. And I was on the table. I was going to say, man, I should mention networking and the five, you're the average of the five people that you're around. And I think that's important. But I think what goes beyond that is your mindset. If your mindset is an 8-figure mindset, if you have an 8-figure per year mindset, and you're making currently 6 figures or 5 figures a year, it's just a matter of time before the external world will catch up with you, right? And that will start coming. On the flip side, if you're making 7 figures, right, and your mindset is a 5-figure mindset, that will also catch up with you. So the bigger your mindset is, the more that you're surrounding yourselves around people that you want to be like, or want to emulate, or eventually want to become, I think the better you're going to be, no matter what. And it doesn't matter what market you're in, what environment the economics are right now. It's really important for you to work on mindset and dedicate yourself to doing that. So maybe during the consistency on one of the 4 C's for 30 minutes a day, you just listen to a podcast that helps get your mind right? That focuses on motivation and vision and all these things that are so important to us as real estate investors, John, right? And really fully integrated and helpful, positive, expansive human beings.
Yeah. So I would like to add, you mentioned a term, a financial thermostat. That's a term that I heard recently, and they just compared to a thermostat. You want the temperature in your house to go up. You set it to 73 degrees. You want your net worth to go up, set your financial thermostat to whatever you want it at, and, stay focused on that, and stay focused on it until you get there. That's sometimes, I can attest in this journey, it can take longer than you hope sometimes, but, just keep plugging away, find something you like to do, and keep providing value. So anyways, Derek, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time. Where can folks reach you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you, John. It's been a pleasure being on. And the easiest way to find us is just to go to elevateequity.org. Just type that into the browser, find us there. You can also type my name into Amazon. We have a book as well for those W-2 workers who are looking to build a side portfolio of rental real estate or looking to get into passive investing. We have everything there for you. Podcasts are out there. And then if you guys want a special gift from us, just go to elevateequity.org/podcast gift, all one word. And you'll be able to find some cool stuff from us about setting up these 5 things that we did that helped us as a couple get ourselves to financial independence while we're working a full-time job. So thank you, John.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Derek Clifford, thanks so much.
Thank you, John. This was awesome.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.